Hello and welcome to a Python and Django live code hangout. Today we're going to be working on the companionship care app and going through the issue backlog, trying to make sure things are cleaned up. We're preparing for Hacktoberfest here, so I'd like to kind of ensure that there are tasks available for selection that are relatively straightforward, not too complicated, but also meaningful to the project. And we'll also go ahead and probably take one of these tasks. So essentially, if you're not familiar, Hacktoberfest is a GitHub sponsored event that encourages people to participate in the open source movement and to help open source projects like companionship care to kind of go forward with their mission. You can stop by hacktoberfest.com to get more details. Linking it here in the chat. Also, I'm going to keep my eye on the chat today. In a previous session, the chat was closed and I didn't realize there were messages there, so I'm sorry for missing the conversation in the last live stream. So lesson learned, I'm going to have it here in my peripheral vision. But basically, to participate, there's only a few steps, and they encourage everybody to participate. Not only coders and people from all sorts of backgrounds and walks of lives and demographics. It's very open and diversity is included. And they've had issues in the past with kind of quality, a bunch of spammy commits being submitted to projects so that people could get the kind of reward or the t-shirt or whatever. So, you know, in terms of diversity, they want to promote diversity. So that means not only coders have to contribute, and people of all genders and, again, backgrounds, demographics, walks of life, everybody's welcome to participate, but we want participants to kind of be giving meaningful contributions. So it could be, in our project, we're encouraging people to contribute design ideas, or there's several types of contributions I've outlined here. So code is one of them. That's kind of, from my perspective, the easiest because that's where I'm working every day. But I realize that, you know, I've got my own interest and my own focus, and there are other people who are much better at community engagement, community development, designing visual thinking, user experience testing, things like that, or even coming up with ideas. Those are all valid ways to contribute. And on this project, I'll make sure that those types of contributions are recognized, and if you're part of Hacktoberfest, that it gets recognized in a way that the Hacktoberfest organizers are looking for. So yeah, just check this out. It's a really good initiative. It's not perfect. Everything is got some shortcomings or room for improvement, but they are giving out 40,000 participant t-shirts, and they do have some clear guidelines. Now, here's the thing: is these pull requests, those can be kind of limiting. So, you know, while trying to promote diversity, not everybody is going to be able to contribute in a way that you can kind of pull request into a project. But I've got some workarounds for that, and specifically, if you're contributing design artifacts, well, those are pretty simple. Those are files you can contribute. These discussions, I can convert these to an issue if we come up with an idea in a discussion. And once we take that idea forward a bit, there's some ways that we can contribute that via the more formal pull request flow. That is code-oriented again. So yeah, just don't hesitate to step forward with your contribution in any way, and we'll make it fit into this the Hacktoberfest kind of process. These are all valuable ways to get involved. And for code, I've then added a new contribution guide. So for people who are interested in running the project locally and maybe contributing code, there are clearly defined steps. A first pass, you could say. I haven't kind of gone through these. It was all off the top of my head, so there may be omissions, but I did my best to provide something. So we've got a new contributing guide as of 2 days ago in preparation for Hacktoberfest. Another thing, we added a code of conduct, which is another requirement. And I hadn't taken that step prior, but it's just a conventional, I think it's called the contributor covenant. And it just encourages people to kind of act harmoniously, celebrate diversity, be inclusive, welcoming. You know, you can have disagreements and friendly debate, things like that. Those are welcome as well. But we just don't want sort of toxic behavior to kind of make people feel that they can't participate in our community. So yes, checking out the chat over here. So let's go ahead and check out the issues. Here are a couple of themes, issues that might be good, and I might take one of these as well myself. But a dark theme, when we view this page, or as you can see any page, this white theme is like kind of blaring. You can kind of see that from the video. I think a lot of people are in that boat. I have my dark theme set on GitHub for that reason. It's easier on the eyes. It's not so much light coming out of your device, even though, you know, lighter colors might be aesthetically appealing. That means that you've got this like flashlight shining in your face, basically. So that can be uncomfortable. So dark theme could be relatively easy to implement. I think there's Bootstrap conventions for that. This is really low-hanging fruit. It's just a toggle that needs to be added to the code. If this photo hasn't been updated, just don't display a block of code. These error page templates, these are also pretty stock, straightforward. You just add an HTML file with like 404.html, for example, and put the code in there, and Django finds that and renders that. I'll link to the documentation of this if I haven't already. Though admittedly, the Django documentation is fairly like verbose. Sometimes if you just want to like a how-to, that docs aren't the best place for that. You'll find better tutorials, but the documentation has to be thorough. But they don't have. There's several types of documentation projects can provide. Django is really good at providing reference documentation, but not simple. Like there's a getting started guide, but not on a lot of topics. There's a getting started with Django overall thing. But there could be more specific how-to content. That could be a way. And in a way, this, you know, YouTube series I'm doing is kind of my how-to guide, where I've created several projects with Django, and I'm showing how to do certain patterns. It's test coverage report. This is an important one. If you're interested in the continuous integration, kind of DevOps career trajectory, culture, we've got a continuous integration pipeline, and we want to add test coverage reporting to that, so we know that on a given pull request, how does that affect our test coverage? What is our baseline test coverage? Things like that. I can tell you it's pretty low, but we want to work to improve that. Yeah, so there's several of these. You can just filter here by Hacktoberfest, essentially. And again, I might take a couple of these. All right. Right, so this is, clean up the metadata. I'd like to make a release soon. Which might mean getting to a little bit more conventional development cadence. Let's commit directly to main here. install it. So it gets me a virtual environment with the correct name, companionship care. And I'll be right back. My tea is empty. And we'll figure out where to start today. I haven't picked a task or anything, so everything is just a little bit of improvisation today. Very cool. So we'll just get the server running. Now, one thing I've noticed is that if I go into mobile friendly view, the menu, oh, right, we disabled it. These drop-down menus are a little bit kludgy. I guess it's just a minor detail. There's a localization menu I need to come back to once we get some translations. So never mind, I was just thinking about that. So let's go ahead and, this person photo thing is just a bit awkward, and I believe it's a low-hanging fruit. So we'll rename it. We'll start the branch here. And it's on 2 places. So if we go to people, templates, person list, and person detail. So on the person detail, we've got upcoming events calendar. Where are we at? Okay, here we are. Organizers. Something I need to think about. I think I'll call them care organizers or care. Score. Person photo, here we are. I think that should be good. Go to view, and the person photo has not been uploaded, so that's that. There's some scaling issues. This is weird that it's wrapping. 5. Will that give me enough room? And this would be 7. It's a little bit better on a medium screen. Large screen, no problem there. Medium screen, it's more organized. It's little touches, but they, can make your user experience kind of feel degraded. Granted, this is not the ideal, most beautiful app. I'm not trying to say that, but I do want to try to pay attention to small details like that. And the mobile screen should be looking, it stacks vertically, so there's not a problem there. All right, so let's see. We'll use these as separate commits. On the detail, I made 2 changes essentially. One was to wrap the person. These texts don't have to be so large, but we'll come back to that later with somebody who's more aesthetically oriented. That's one of the really big ways that this project could use some help. I'm not so aesthetically oriented. I went to Bootstrap because it's got enough attention to detail that it has a good baseline. But if somebody's really more acutely aware or could offer some suggestions for improvement, everything, font sizes, layout, icons, colors, anything, that would be grateful, and take your advice into account. So now we're on the person list. We need to do the person list and look again for this person photo on the card, and same thing. So if companion person. So this is a slightly different perspective in here. Because the people list is actually a list of companions for the current user. So these people listed here is not all the people in the system. It's people for which my user, logged in user, has a companionship relationship. So yeah, it's looking good. It's just a little bit cleaner. Again, those small details make a difference. And again, just using Bootstrap semantics. Default design for a good baseline. Oh, same commit message, really. Other than that, so I'm using this Bootstrap where you can click anywhere in the card. No, I just wanted to check that. There's not much more I'd like to do during this pull request. I'll keep it relatively simple. Something low-hanging. I don't want to necessarily rely on Hacktoberfest in order to, and plus it's not until October, so I'm going to continue developing this in the meantime. And sometimes I just need like an easy task to take. And today's one of those days. Kind of tired, so closes number 83. So I was reading also recently about commit styles and rebasing and merge commits, and I've not really ever had a strong opinion on that. My default has been to use merge commits for many years, and then I worked at a project where the people who were kind of like more, well, they just really wanted us to use rebase on everything. So I just got in the habit of using rebase. But then I've just seen it being so confusing, especially to new contributors who just want to add something in the code. And I had a pull request recently to this exact point. And because I was using rebase, their branch got out of sync because I was modifying the commit history. And so where they had branched had been modified by my branch when I rebased it into the main. And it meant that they couldn't get, they were blocked from merging that commit. So essentially I just came in and I fixed that because I sort of have fixed that enough times that I know how to do it. For myself, I've needed to fix it, but long story short, I'm just going to use merge commits from here on out. And I was reading, some reasons why rebase can be harmful in projects, and one of the main ones is, and it's all, advised against doing this on public branches. When you modify the history of public branches, all these other contributors' branches get out of sync because the history has been rewritten. So I was misusing rebase in my kind of naive intention of following some kind of a purist linear history pursuit, which I don't think is even necessary. I've never used git bisect. That's been one of the reasons that it's been brought up. And I read an article that kind of debunked most of the reasoning for using rebasing on anything other than your own private branch. So for that reason, I'm going to just create a merge commit, and I've actually disabled squash and rebase merging. I'm not so against squashing, but I don't mind having a few commits a little bit of redundancy, that's fine by me. The CI typically will only run on the last commit push, so if you're worried about your CI running too much, which can make sense, that can be quite costly. Just don't push so often. But there we go. So that issue should now be closed. Very cool. So 20 minutes in, I've closed a Hacktoberfest issue. Let's try to close an issue that I haven't labeled as Hacktoberfest. This one I think is going to be sort of non-trivial, but once I get the pattern here, I think it'll be very useful. So in other words, the issue is that I'm sending a lot of code to the client. For every activity that gets scheduled on a page, there are some modal dialogues, like adding a person, editing the activity, and deleting the activity. So for every one of these activities that renders, there's 3 hidden modals that get rendered into the DOM as well. So now we've got 6 hidden modals. 9. On and on and on. So the DOM gets pretty heavy. And really, I only need 3 modals. The thing is, I need to pass data into the modal so that when I edit an activity, it fills in a form with that particular activity data and a list of activity types and things like that. That's where I think is a little bit non-trivial, but something I could figure out. So if I just take a quick look at this, just a research phase. And here I would believe that I'll need to trigger a modal from Bootstrap 5 via JavaScript. Or data attributes. Actually, this is what I'm doing. I'm using the data attributes. The thing is, these are all relying on the document to already contain the DOM. So I wouldn't necessarily solve that. I would have to have pushed all that modal markup to the client already. Yeah, so I think this is going to be a non-trivial task, and honestly a premature optimization, because this might be a minor issue if I add pagination to this upcoming events, where we'll only display 5 or 10 at a time. Granted, it's still over publishing. It's like a lot of extra markup, and it's something that like a framework, front-end framework might solve it differently as well. If I were perhaps to use like Vue, for example, because I can incrementally or progressively enhance this page with a Vue component, Vue.js. I might be able to add a reusable component that takes just the data, so at least there would be less markup to send to the client. There would be some JavaScript. And then the trade-off is then they'd have to download Vue. So nothing's perfect. It's probably premature at this point, so let's not take this task, and it's not part of Hacktoberfest. Well, let's go ahead and try this test coverage. I would at least like to be able to run test coverage here. So now let's go ahead and check out the main. We'll add coverage pi to the project. keep an eye on the chat. It's all quiet. Now this task has several steps involved. First, I need to enable tick coverage. There's a code climate report that will give us coverage reports as part of our pull requests. And then we want to set up a Github Action, which may just need a few lines of code. So let's just try this. Oops. Let's get a little bit bigger view of it. Yes, you pass coverage. Alright, so this, I'm trying to open this new tab, my control key doesn't move this. My keyboard is not working, it's like skipping keys. So we do have telling you my keyboard's not working. I'm making a lot of typos, yes, but my keyboard skips keys and something wrong with the communications. I'll be right back while this is installing. I'm gonna get some more tea. Excellent. So now we've got Django coverage installed. How do you use it? Actually, I should look before I leave here. Yeah, these projects are archived. Should read this a little bit closer. Okay. surprised there's not a better story for this. Because it's okay, it is quite comprehensive, the documentation. No option source there, huh? Make sure I didn't have a typo there. And we'll just run on people. Huh. There we go. Very cool. All right, what if I take off the... Now some of these we want to exclude, like migrations. I'm not using the admin so much, I don't need to test admin. Or much in the core, to be honest. But here we are, this is the important part. Yeah, so I'll need to run this, filter this down a bit. Alright, so we're on the right path though, one step at a time, right? I've got the general idea of where I want to go, the gist of where I want to go. And that gives me at least some room, some motivation to explore. This is something that's kind of coming up for me lately, in a conversation with a friend, is sort of what motivates our creativity. And for example, you might, often we know something, we generally want to do something. I want to be a programmer, or I want to be a movie director, or I want to be a musician. These high level goals. We don't know concretely, I want to direct the prequel to this and that movie. We don't know maybe concretely at the very specific level how that would manifest, but just we have a general inclination. How do you take that general inclination and sort of turn that into tangible outputs, like tangible creative tasks or endeavors, things like that? It's kind of tricky. So this project, for example, I had a general idea that was actually kind of given to me from experiences and people around me who have had experiences where a loved one would be living independently but having troubles with, basic daily stuff. And I'm like, how could I help that, solve that problem? What would be a way to encourage companionship? So that kind of gave me the general framework to explore. Then I got a couple of ideas. I'm like, okay, well, for example, how could I make a shared calendar? Well, Google Calendar might be a good option, stuff like that. So, or shared chat. Well, they could use a WhatsApp group, right? Stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, so it might not even need my own software and development skills for solving those problems. But, as I continued to reflect, I started realizing, well, I might be able to create a tool that's tailor fit to these types of groups, which may not have real-time chat, but that you could integrate with a real-time chat. You could say, well, we're using a WhatsApp group, so I don't need to write a WhatsApp app. That actually saves me a lot of time because that's very complex. So in other words, the idea gets more specific and you get then more specific steps to follow. And then as you start following those steps, other steps unfold. Like here I am learning how to use test coverage, right, in Django, which I, from the idea, wouldn't have thought of this as a tangible step. But it's like, it adds a small step I can take. Now these steps can add up. Like the more finely you measure the shore of a lake, the longer your measurement becomes. So you got to be careful not to get bogged down in too many details, otherwise you'll never get where you're trying to go. Which is another reason why I try to use something like Django, Bootstrap, those types of things, so I don't have to get in so many of those details, so I can get where I'm trying to go, and not have to invent my own framework types of stuff like that. But yeah, so these are all just kind of ideas that are kind of swirling around in my head, and I'm trying to put the idea into practice, like about how do I do creative works like music and art, as well as creative works like software development. All right, so now we've got some tests running and a test coverage report being generated. So I think at this point, it's safe to say coverage is going to stick around. So we'll go ahead and commit that. And we're in a branch. I'm not going to push this branch yet. But what we want to do is now hook this into a system. So here's coverage. This is like a binary file, I think. So yeah, it's not going to render. It's something that's just for the computers, not for people, which is cool. But there's a way I get this coverage report into tools like Code Climate. And this is in my git ignore, so it's not being committed. It's not being tracked, right? Somewhere in here, these coverage reports are excluded. So it's by convention, you don't check these into revision control. That's cool, I'll follow that convention. But I need to hook this in to, I'm not running the code right now, we're working on tests, into Code Climate. And this is where there's not a very clear pattern to follow. First I was able to turn to the Django docs. It gave me actually a very clear code command to run. So I will actually add this into our README. Our contributing guide. Still keep an eye on chat in my peripheral vision, so if anybody's hanging out there, let me know. If you got any suggestions, ideas for the project, suggestions for test coverage specifically, I could use some advice. Or if you just want to chat about what you're interested in, that's cool too. So So there we go. We added a note on test coverage. Better than nothing, and saves you a trip to the Django docs. Now here's where it's gonna get abstract, I guess. So essentially, you can set up a Github Action to run test coverage. Let's go climate docs. Code climate docs. And I guess this is okay to keep in your, this environment variable is okay to keep in your action. See, there's so much duplication here. I just wish you would cache these intermediary steps. Like that should be done prior to both of these jobs executing. We might not need a separate step in our case if this includes this test command. So it would be something like this. So I'm going to take a shot at it. I don't know that this will work. We're going to follow my earlier intuition. So under GitHub, we have workflows, and I've got a Python step lint, and I'll add coverage, and probably don't need that. But our command is slightly different. And we're to feed that. See, run. So it uses that, and the coverage command is here. And we need to get this. So one moment, let me just get my this off stream privacy thing. Still checking the chat. CC test report ID is, how do we get that? Manage your care, repo setting, test coverage. It's a write-only ID that can only post test reports. All right, so I think it's relatively benign to have this in your workflow. So what it's going to do, I suppose, these are kind of like black boxes. Whoops. Here's another example. Highlight this. Control C. There it goes. Coverage, and it's coverage by type. Got it. Okay, so I guess it has to be a multi-line stream. Cool. All right, well, let's try it out. Probably got something wrong in there, but it's create pull request closes 62. And this will be a draft. And we'll go ahead and open this on GitHub. Something's already failing right off the bat. Dang. Okay, so I don't have to use code climate to do these test coverage automation. So the research step, I do want to use coverage. I don't want to keep coverage in revision control. This looks better. I don't have to publish. I don't have to keep it in a revision control, and I don't have to publish my any secret keys. This is clean. So I do like this code cub option. Code climate's good, but I just can't get the integrated report to work. So let's go ahead and remove this code climate one. I believe this is free for open source software. Very cool. Yeah, I like that. So, this is one thing I think I couldn't get through the... Okay, this is okay. But then it wants to add to my my work. I don't want it to do that. I wish there was just a way to use code coverage with granting only access to one organization and not your whole everything. I can't do that. I can't just grant it access to everything, all the people I work with, and yeah, I cannot do that. It's ridiculous. Well, wait. Yeah, and you have to log in with... And it says public and private, even though I said public only. You know, that's just broken. Public repos only. Public and private. So I can't grant code cover. I think that was the blocker here. Because I have organizations to which I belong, what I might have the right privileges, but I don't. I would rather not grant it. There's no way to opt out of that. It's a GitHub.
Create an account on CodeCo. Click Get Started on the page and sign in with your GitHub. GitHub account. You'll see this interstitial letting you know that you must have an admin approved CodeHub for your organization before usage. If you're not already signed into CodeHub, you can do so here. Here, you can view the permission set that we request on behalf of your GitHub account. This allows CodeHub to do things like write status checks on pull requests and ensure proper access to your repositories. If you're an admin, you can also grant CodeHub organization access. Otherwise, you'll need to request access for your orgs from an admin to use CodeHub with those repositories.
So is this the case that CodeHub already has access? My keyboard is just not working. That they've already granted it access? Alright. And then these I would have to request or grant specifically. So I want to grant that one. And 1 moment. Just bring this over here. Let me see here. All right, we're good to go. So yeah, really bright. You can see the importance of having. Okay, and so then they have a lot of code coverages. So yeah, I was mistaken. Those green check boxes were organizations that already authorized it, I suppose, and I had to grant it to a couple of extras. All right, cool. Jazz band's using it. So I'm looking for. I have to follow the steps here. So let's remove this, not the working tree, but the actual file. So unfortunately I could not get the code climate testing to work, coverage to work. I wish it was a lot more straightforward. I say code climate has good user experience otherwise, but like the test coverage integration is really tricky. And it's oriented towards like NPM, and there's a lot of kind of caveats, and it doesn't even work. So I'm not even sure where to, how to proceed. I don't have a lot of time. I mean, it's really nice to offer the service for free to open source. So I don't mean to seem like I'm complaining, but just kind of expressing like, it's not so much frustration, but it would be nice to have an integrated code coverage report. And I had pushed this to GitHub to see if the action would run. All right, so now we're going to be able to zero in on CodeCove. Code climate action didn't work. CodeCove, so this would be companionship. Care, not yet set up. Companion. Set up repo. Let's get started. Awesome. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. We're gonna use GitHub Action. This is officially maintained. That's good. But this requires you to run a code coverage report. All right, cool. So this is a separate. They said this is optional. I guess 3 cents is fine. I don't think we need the whole. For this, we just need this file. Let me check these out. Python. Makes more sense that we install the dependencies separately instead of grouping everything into one command. But okay, here's a bit verbose. But that way you can see if there's a step that breaks, it's the dependency installation or something like that. Stop object. So set up Python. I think 3.10 should be good. what we're targeting. Yeah, and I'm not sure where this context will be. It should be in the root directory, so you'll have to check the... You'll have to check the project directory. Now, where'd the command go? I don't know if it's going to work. Is there a way to test this locally? I'm not sure if it'll find it. So let's take it one step at a time and then we'll clean up the code. Trying it out of T again. Sync changes. We'll grab some tea and be right back. See if it fails immediately. Failed immediately. It's running. Okay, one moment. All right, there we go, lint test, but the code coverage configuration didn't run. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, why didn't it run? First, let's try to get the thing to run. We should be able to at least get up to this. Could be something to do with that. It's not a new pull request. But I am pushing to a branch. So I've got a pull request against the main branch, but I'm pushing to push. So I might be able to simplify it and just say push pull request, because it was originally, the example here at least, was a list on push pull request. Let's see if this works. Push. And the other event is pull request. Because it's not running. Oh, wait a minute. Code scanning, code QL. No. That was the wrong one. Dang it. shoot. Is it because I'm adding one? Like, why isn't this one included there? Well, here's what I'm gonna do. Just clean it up and merge it. This doesn't seem like the right way to have to do this. What's next? Oh man. I don't want to close that. So let's see now if it'll run these. Huh. I don't see anything different about this. Hey, what's up, Silvercar? Yeah, I'm using VS Code for this project here. Got the few packages installed, GitHub integration, and a couple of extensions. But yeah, it's pretty much, other than that, I just, let's see what I've got installed here. Some Dart and Django plugins. But I'm not sure if I wonder if there's a GitHub Actions extension that could somewhat help here. With the syntax. Yeah, well, at least it'll help me with the syntax. Ooh, bright. I'll create a new branch from our main one and see why this is not running. It's very strange. So we've got, it's defining the workflows thing. And if I look at it side by side with something like, CodeCove. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry, the Python one, for example. Let's look at them side by side. So we've got the name, then we've got some on events, and we're just using an array syntax here. Then we got jobs. Okay, the job could be coverage or what's the name? Runs on some environment variables, which may or may not be necessary, but that's all right. So we've got steps. Uses, check out master, check out the code. I don't know if that matters. Pass it in there. Set up Python with install poetry, install dependencies. Now these have worked previously. Generate coverage report. I believe that could be failing, but it might be failing silently. So 62. Number 62. Yeah, it's not picking it up. It's a bit frustrating. What am I doing wrong? There's some probably a little oversight. Workflow YAML with code coverage action. The file name doesn't so much matter, I think, right? It's in workflows. It's a YAML file. Well, alternatively, I can just add this to the Python one that is already running. Oh, goodness. Wow. Let's just try here with all none of these optionals, except the verbose, right? Let's try that. Then I can just drop this code YAML. All right, so let's take a look here. All right. So I'll need to generate the code coverage. Hopefully that'll just run. Same environment. And this should be project. Coverage. There's a couple kind of confusing factors here. One, I'm using poetry, so it's I'm not sure how to generate the code coverage report. I don't want to require developers to generate a code coverage report every commit or something. This should be generated as part of the CI pipeline. We don't want to keep this in our revision control. So I need to run a command to generate it. For whatever reason, right, I have to prefix this with. Then that'll work. Poetry run to run the command in the poetry environment. So that's okay. That's an easy mistake. The source is actually in the project directory. So that should do. I think that should be all that's required. But this is very slow, having to wait for a CI pipeline to run every time. Yeah, but at least we got a tangible failure there. Because I couldn't find that coverage command. It was running it in a global environment. We need to run it inside of our virtual environment. Then I need to make sure that these these are correct. The source directory is in the project subdirectory, I'm pretty sure. And that we need to prefix this manage pi with the path and then run the test command. Then hopefully this will work. Okay, let's see. Actually, so generate code coverage. So 0 tests. Okay. Well, this I can test locally. So basically, if I run in the root directory, poetry run coverage, what happens? 0 tests. All right, so we're making progress. Able to test this locally. What if I do this? That's not gonna. No file to run. So that was not the correct one. What about source? Back to dot. Found 0 tests. Huh. What if I cd in a project? I say source dot and it finds the tests. Well, maybe there's a way to specify a root directory subdirectory. So working directory is not set here. It checks it out, sets up Python, installs poetry, some dependencies, lints, and this is smart enough to recursively lint, I guess. That's what I meant. Boy, the inbuilt terminal in this VS Code is kind of kludgy. I'm trying to run. Found 0 tests. Found 0 tests. Ah, okay. Well, it's either I tell tests where the directory to run, or I change into that directory. There we go. All right, so I can append to that. So then we come back over here. Poetry run, coverage run. Yeah, project. Yeah. Then I probably don't need this source flag. This is a guess again. Poetry run, coverage run. Let's try that out. Running things locally, it really helps. So if I can run this command, this poetry command locally, then I can debug it and experiment without having to push and pull. But sometimes you get yourself in a development position where only some parts of the actions will run in continuous environment, or worse, you'll have a whole platform you're working on, a whole project you're working on that only runs in a cloud service. You can't even run the code locally if you wanted. And that becomes a very painstaking, painful developer experience, very tedious. And you find yourself kind of stuck writing, maybe writing by tests because the test runner can invoke certain other services that you might be relying on. It's not quite how I prefer if I have the choice to develop a project. So basically keep these things kind of monolithic and simple as long as you possibly can. And be very cautious about claims that you have to have some kind of cloud-based microservices architecture to scale when you don't even really know which parts of your application might be the bottleneck to scaling. The bottleneck often isn't what you would expect, and until you've got some concrete data, architecting your project from day one on some kind of cloud microservices or Lambda functions or whatever the sentiment is at the time is a big upfront cost. It's a huge cost to bear and a really poor developer experience. In my brief experience at a couple of companies who've taken this architecture. Okay, so that was a commit, and let's go ahead and check in on that. All right, let's check the details of the Linton test. And the code QL is kind of more slow, but I'm gonna run through this. So generate code coverage. Well, what happened there? Found the tests and ran them. And code coverage, Linux detected, running, project root located there, no token, no requested. Code coverage pi is not installed. Well, it should be. All right, so that's the next problem. I'm not sure. Well, it should be that each of these is modifying the environment. So each of these, the dependencies are installed so that you can run. And so this should be able to write to the file system. This might be incorrect. And perhaps if I just specify the root directory, it'll know to find the right coverage file. So in that case, we're back to the code coverage documentation, which is a good step. I don't know if you need a trailing slash there. Directory. Interesting. So they want this. Well, I can just test it a little bit. No. Well, let's see what other people. It'd be nice if I could cache these steps. That's my current pull request. Cool. This is kind of getting something. But. So let me see if it actually does. Output a coverage file. Yeah, it did. All right, let me do that one more time. Yes. So we got no coverage file. Now we have a coverage file. Yes. All right, so that does output a coverage file. So, yeah, 100% is too much, and that's not in your way, is what I was looking for. All right. So one thing, is this the right format? How does it regenerate that? Control key just doesn't work. Left control. Oh. Right. So that was incorrect. So yeah, the command's running from the root of the project. Makes sense. Not in the project directory, but the repo root. And it's outputting the coverage file there. So this might even work without specifying it. Less is more. Can't remember if I've already run it without that. Right, and if so, Hopefully it'll pick up the .coverage file. Hopefully the format is good. I don't see many other people having an issue with this. It leads me to believe that the format should be fine. I'm back to the drawing board here, aside from specifying the file manually. Yeah. One thing I can do is this. Token. I'll ignore that. So frustrating. Oh, I see. So first it says no token specified or token is empty. Yeah, it's not finding the coverage file. It's right here. Yeah. Alright, so I just have to tell it the file. I'm gonna have to get a... Something's weird with my keyboard. Alt also is not working. Because it doesn't seem to look for that one by default. Not a big deal. Yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of wrap it up here. It's been 2 hours. Productive first half hour. Just did a small feature fix, bug fix, I guess you could call it, and wanted to improve the project health by automating this coverage reporting. That test party is working. Success. That looks a lot better. So there's the file. There's the commit. No token specified because we don't need it as a public file. Also, these would normally be excluded from the search. Hence, I wasn't finding it before, but I passed it explicitly. Yes, and then there's the coverage file. Okay. Some metadata about GitHub Actions. Ping the thing. Passed. I'll take the verbose off. Let's see. I'm gonna go with it. I don't know. Well, what happens if I'm installing this for the first time? I guess it'll resolve itself later once we run test coverage on a particular commit that's been merged to main, or that's subsequently been forked in a branch. All right, so I think we're just gonna go with it. We'll call it closes. I might need to come back around. But there we go. Let's recap what we've done today. Two pull requests merged. configuration. Secret key exposing. Very cool. I'll go ahead and do these, review these pull requests in the browser. Try it again. Right. It's a bit ambiguous there, but there it is. Which will automatically source that environment variable. Okay, I'm just going to take one quick break and then recap what we've worked on today. All right, we're ready to recap. Hello and welcome to a recap of today's Python and Django live code hangout. We've been working on the companionship care app and took two tasks. One is a small visual bug where some element was displaying that when it had no data, an image placeholder. And the other one was to try to improve our test coverage reporting and somehow include that in our continuous integration pipeline. So first, the changes in the user interface. When navigating to the People tab, a grid of people will render. I've only got one here, who are companions for the currently signed in user. In other words, the currently signed in user is offering time to spend with these users here on the people page. With these, they're not actually using the software. Sorry, it's a little bit backwards. But generally, the care companions will start a caring circle for a person who may or may not be technologically savvy or capable of using technology or interested. Although if they are, they can certainly also join the group and add activities. In any case, when you have these groups defined, you have an option of choosing a photo. That adds a little bit of a personal touch. But being optional, when no photo is provided, it shouldn't display anything. Now previously there was a placeholder photo here displayed with a missing source attribute. In other words, the source attribute would be defined, but there would be no image, so Django couldn't output a correct source attribute. So it was kind of like a broken image thing. And that was also appearing here in this people card. So all we had to do is just add a conditional check. If that image has been uploaded, then you can render it. Otherwise, it should just omit that for, yeah, making the user interface look a little cleaner. One other small touch was to tweak the layout here a bit on the medium screen. So when I'm in my local development, I've got the code and app running side by side in the browser. And this is essentially what you would see as a medium width screen according to the Bootstrap breakpoint settings, sort of like a tablet view. And then they were just a bit of scrunching up. This icon was rendering above the first, above the companion's word, and it meant that this whole thing was pushed down just slightly, and it looked a little bit bad, but wasn't a deal breaker or anything. But those little aesthetic issues, they kind of add up and give you a sense that there may be other issues underneath the surface that are even worse. So you kind of want to pay attention to those details. I'm also really interested in hearing some feedback from people who are design oriented. I'm doing sort of a minimum viable design here using Bootstrap primarily, and leaning on the work of the designers who have put their time and effort into making Bootstrap a mature and quality framework. Granted, there's more improvements that could be made. So let's take a quick look at the code. So relating to the layout issues, I just needed to define a medium width, medium column width. I had already defined medium column settings for this right-hand side column. But since I only had defined the left column as a call, there was something weird. And also, I believe the column width of 4 was too narrow for this word and icon to appear side by side. I can change the font size as well, but this is heading level 2 using default heading level 2 font size, which is quite large even compared to heading level 1. I think the only difference is the font weight. The sizes are really close. So the only change there was to change the column width, and then around the image, this source attribute would sometimes be empty because this person photo hadn't been uploaded, so I couldn't generate the thumbnail URL, for example, which is a helper provided by Wagtail. And you can, it's really nice. It lets you specify, what type of thumbnail you'd like and the pixel density, I think, or the width, I guess. Nonetheless, that couldn't generate if the image hadn't been uploaded. So I just needed to check that prior to trying to render this element to the page. And the same thing on the person list page. Just needed to wrap those fields with conditionals to make sure that they exist. And that's probably a common pattern with fields in general. You don't want to render empty markup, even if it's not displaying to the user, because it could cause layout issues, unexpected issues, and it's just unnecessary to send that to the user. I have another issue relating to sending unnecessary or duplicate modal dialog markup to the user on this page, but that's something I'm going to try to tackle separately. I don't know what the solution will be, but that's neither here nor there. So the other task was a bit of a head scratcher, and I'm still not sure it works correctly. I'm pretty sure it works. But that'll be, truth will be told, there in subsequent pull requests. But essentially, I want to use this service called CodeCove, and they're pretty aesthetically pleasing. They offer free code coverage reporting for open source projects, and the goal here is to start improving the health of this project, including extending the code coverage. And they'll integrate with your continuous integration pipeline and see continuous deployment if you've got one. I've only begun creating a continuous integration for this project, meaning in this context that when we create a pull request, there are certain checks that are run, and they'll give you warnings if those checks don't pass. Now, one of the checks I want to run is this code coverage, see how it's changing over time. Right now, it's telling me there's no code coverage report uploaded for the base commit. And I think this means the commit, when I created the branch from main, at that point, I didn't have a coverage report functionality because this pull request is what adds that. So I think this error is just saying, hey, we don't have any report to compare, so we can't display a comparison report. So we'll see if that works in the future. This took me several attempts. It wasn't super difficult, but it was a bit confusing. But what it boiled down to, and what I believe the final working command is, I added to our Python workflow another step that generates code coverage. Actually, 2 steps. I should have named this one a little bit better. Firstly, we generate code coverage, and using Poetry as the project package manager here, we have in previous steps installed the dependencies, and then we run a few other tasks, linting and code formatting, sorting the imports, those types of things. Those were all working, running any tests that we do have, generating coverage report for the test is a new command. So all of these commands need to run in the Poetry virtual environment. So you have to prefix them with Poetry run, otherwise you get errors about things can't be found. Then you pass in the command. So we're going to run this Python coverage py, which was also added during this work session, but not in this pull request. So we're just looking at the final output of the second attempt of this task. The first attempt I added a dependency, but the approach for generating the coverage was kind of a no-go, so I just removed that. So we run this code coverage from coverage py. We tell it, we're running actually a manage py test command, and we're telling the Django manage py to test our project directory, because the structure of this repository, all the code is in a subdirectory. But the context for running this command is it's running it here in this root, the project root in the continuous integration pipeline. So I needed to prefix this run command with project directory. The manage py needs to be told also to run tests in the project subdirectory, since the kind of Python context is still here at the project root. That outputs a small file, coverage file, which I don't know how to open. I mean, I don't think it has any meaningful output here, but that can be passed to CodeCove. But by default, CodeCove doesn't know to look for the Django coverage file as .coverage. And this perhaps convention dates back to early in the Django development. So the name of the file, basically I needed to specify that to tell code coverage where the coverage is stored. Now this is not checked into our repository. It's not part of the code, and it shouldn't be. By default, our getignore excludes coverage related stuff. So I'm using the default GitHub getignore template. It includes a lot of stuff in here that, through other experience of developers and Python ecosystem, they've included a lot of things. Virtual environments, IDE related stuff. So in your case, by convention don't include coverage. And the GitHub template knows about the coverage of the convention of outputting coverage as .coverage, but for whatever reason CodeCove didn't find it. Or I experimented with this. I had to specify this in order to get it to work. But that said, I think it should be running now. in upcoming pull requests should have coverage report, and I'm going to double check offline to make sure everything is, or to see what I can, what happens in the code coverage user interface when I log in. Okay, that's essentially it. This has been another Python and Django live code hangout. One announcement, Hacktoberfest is coming up, and I've been doing a little preparation, labeling some issues with Hacktoberfest tag, and I labeled the project with Hacktoberfest. So starting in October, if you're looking for some tasks to take for your Hacktoberfest contributions, you might consider stopping by our project. And if you do decide to take any of these, just let me know and the GitHub issue, and I'm available for any kind of mentorship or running any questions you need to, you encounter any difficulties or any questions you have, we can discuss those. And if time permits, I can do a little pair programming with you as well, depending on our time zone and availability. So yeah, keep us in mind for the Hacktoberfest starting in October. All right, well, thanks again for your time. Hope you're doing well out there.